Gentlemen, and welcome to the Danvers Zoning Board of Appeals. If I could ask you all to silence your cell phones or turn them off to vibrate or whatever so we're not interrupted. I will start with introducing our board. Down to my right is Jeff Sauer. Our clerk tonight is Ken Scholes. Myself, the chairman, John Bowner. We have Corrine Doherty to my left. And I believe Ken Javanen is online with us. Ken, are you there?
Yep.
If you could just, yep, okay,
Yeah.
very good. And our alternate
Excellent.
tonight, excuse me, is Katie Hislop. From our planning department, our planning director, Mr. Brian Zakelli, and our Miss Everything over there, Miss Georgia Prendergast, keeping us all glued together. We have, board members, we have 3 sets of minutes before us. One dated for February 27th, another for March 13th, and a third set of minutes for March 27th. I will entertain a motion to accept all 3 unless there's any further discussion.
So moved.
I've got a motion
I'll second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and so we've got 2 cases on for tonight. One is continued. I think a lot of people here in the audience for the NEHD project. We will start with that. And I think, Attorney Buchanan, just to let you know, we have one letter we will read in before we go out to public comment. And I think with that said, I'll have our clerk read in our first case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our first case is 154 Water Street, zoned R2. Request for a special permit in accordance with Table 1 and Section 30.2.f of the Danvers Zoning Bylaw to allow a new senior, 55-plus in age, affordable housing development consisting of 140 senior independent dwellings units, 70 of which will deed restricted affordable. With a preference for those residents who are deaf, deaf-blind, or near-deaf, and with affordable income eligibility from 30% AMI to market rate. The subject applicant has been selected by the Danvers Housing Authority to be the project developer in accordance with zoning bylaw section 30.2.f.1. The applicant is requesting variances from section 30.2.f.2 and table 2 to allow the development building to be 4 stories in height where 2 stories is maximum, to be 49 feet in height where 30 feet is maximum, and to have more than 8 units in the development building. A variance from section 30.2.f.3 is requested to allow the permanent parking spaces for the new development to be located within the dimensional side and rear setback of the property. Request made by New England Home for the Deaf, Inc. and Wind Development Company Limited Partnership, docket 23-5012.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Nancy McCann. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, New England Home for the Deaf and Wind Development. And we are, again, requesting a special permit for a permitted use under section 30.2.f, which is a multifamily development, affordable housing development for seniors age 55 and over on the campus of New England Home for the Deaf, with a preference for those who are deaf, deaf-blind, or near-deaf, as well as a preference for Danvers residents. We do have our entire team here tonight. Steve Sacco, Chair of New England Home for the Deaf, Adam Stein and Remy Schneider from Wind Development, Steve Prestigion, our project architect, Jesse Johnson, our project engineer, and Mike Blyer, our landscaped architect. Again, 50% of the 140 units proposed would be affordable. That allows the town of Danvers to count all 140 units on the subsidized housing inventory. We met with you on March 13th and made a full and detailed presentation at that time. Tonight, we do not intend to represent the application, but rather update the board on what we've accomplished since the March 13th meeting, as well as our response to comments that we received that night, as well as comments that we've received since that night. Since the March 13th meeting, we did have a site view. It was chilly, but we had a site view with the board members on the property at which the building corners were staked, and the description of the elevation was that we described at the March 13th meeting was apparent to the board members. The board members were also able to see the site itself, including the encumbrances on the property that we talked about: topography, wetlands, riverfront, 200-foot public utility easement. All of that was visible for the board members, as well as the new curb cut location that's being proposed. The board members were also able to see encroachments that exist on the New England Home for the Deaf property by abutting property owners that have occurred over time. You saw the existing Thompson House, which is an independent living 62 plus on the campus of New England Home for the Deaf, as well as the assisted living and rest home facility, which was the newest constructed building back in 2006. The board was also able to see not only the New England Home for the Deaf buildings, but as well as the historic New England Home for the Deaf buildings, which is a separate condominium complex, not operated in conjunction with NEHD, and the architecture of those buildings. We have had a market study done, which helps us and informs us in responding to some of the comments that we received. And interestingly, as the board probably is aware, and not a surprise to anyone, about 45% of the Danvers population is over 55, and that is a demographic that's growing not only in Danvers, but in the North Shore as well as nationwide. So again, we're not going to represent, but rather respond to some of the comments, or all of the comments really, that we were able to receive at the last hearing. So I'll just go through those, if you would let me do that quickly.
Please.
And then we'll go on to showing you the renderings and things that we've submitted. So the first comment, some information with regard to the Thompson House. That's the existing over 62 senior housing development that's located on the campus of New England Home for the Deaf. We had questions about the waiting list. We had indicated at the last meeting that it's a 3 to 5 year waiting list, and the board asked for some additional information on that. The waiting list currently has 13 deaf, blind, and hard of hearing individuals on the waiting list now. It had been more than that. It had actually been 30. But then Thompson House serves a community 62 and over, not 55 and over. So as a result, some of those names came off that list. But the need, of course, is still there, and those folks would be able to be on the list for the proposed development, which is 55 and over. Of the 13 folks on the waiting list now, 10 of those are from the North Shore. We did submit on April 4th a full submission with responses to comments, which our project architect is going to go over with you. Those responses to comments included some revised renderings, as well as a code compliance report, which dealt with some questions that came up about code compliance for emergency situations in the property and evacuation and that sort of thing, and those were addressed in that submission. And again, Steve Prestigion will go over that with you. Suffice to say, in summary, that our code compliance report indicates that we are far exceeding the state requirements for code compliance for this particular community and the folks that are served by it for purposes of this residential development. The development team met with neighborhood representatives Sandy Lane and Alan Fiorenti, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, last week. And we had some comments from them, and we provided some responses. And I'll go through those briefly. The first request was whether we would consider a right of first offering to the Danvers Historic Society for any archaeological items, if any, that are found on the property that are not wanted by the state, during the normal archaeological review that we discussed in some detail at the last meeting, which is a standard review that would be done for a development like this. And the response was yes, NEHD and WIN would agree to offer such items first to the Danvers Historic Society should any items of archaeological significance be found. There were questions regarding the mechanical screening, and that will be addressed by Steve Prestigion when he shows you the renderings. There was discussion regarding the height of the building. When we first met with the community prior to filing, we had a building that was 4 stories uniformly. And after that community meeting, we did lower sections of the building that face the neighborhoods to 3 stories. So the building, as submitted to you and as we showed you the last time, as well as in the new renderings, is in fact a mix of a 3-story and a 4-story building. So we discussed, that was discussed with the neighborhood representatives. Lighting, cutoff fixtures are provided, dark sky compliant lighting, so that there would not be an intrusion of lighting from the project onto any of the neighborhood residences. And as part of our application, we did include a photometric plan that, that supports that and provides the information as well. The appearance of the building and making the building less commercial and more residential in feel was discussed with the neighborhood representatives. And we feel, and we certainly hope that you feel as well, that there's been a significant improvement in the appearance of the building to provide a more, not only a more residential feel, but also the roof treatment brings the building down in appearance, which we think addresses that comment, and that was, again, discussed with the neighborhood representatives and was part of the package that was submitted to you. As we saw on the site view, due to bringing the hill down, the proposed building, the overall 3- and 4-story building, will actually be in elevation a foot lower than the existing New England Home for the Deaf building. And I do have the elevations. The tallest building currently is at elevation 71. The NEHD building, which is existing on the site, that's the most recently constructed building, is at elevation 74.6. And the proposed building is at elevation 73.5. So while we are proposing 3- and 4-story structure, it is actually lower in elevation, finished elevation, than the existing buildings on the site. The last question that was discussed, I believe, with the neighborhood representatives was, how will the neighbors know that this is going to be 55 plus and not changed to non-age restricted as things move forward? What is the guarantee? Is there a contract, in fact, that this will be 55 plus? And the answer is yes. And that contract is the special permit that this board would grant. The special permit is recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and the special permit under Section 30.2.f of the zoning bylaw is only permitted for an over 55, for a senior housing project. So the special permit cannot be converted by the applicant or otherwise to a non-age restricted process. So is there a contract? Yes, there is. There's a contract with the town, and that's the special permit that's issued that is very specific, that it is 55 and over. The preferences for deaf, blind, and near deaf, as well as a preference for Danvers residents, is part of our application, and that those preference categories can be made a condition of the special permit by this board. And the applicant, it's part of our presentation, we would accept such conditions. That is the project that's being proposed, is preference for deaf, blind, and near deaf, as well as a secondary preference for Danvers residents. The neighborhood representatives, Sandy and Mr. Fiorenti, that were met with last week would also be wishing to address the board when you get to public comments. You should have received, as part of your package, the Affordable Housing Trust letter of support. I believe it was not in your package at the last meeting, although Mr. Trask did speak at the last meeting, but you should have that letter now in your packages. And the Affordable Housing Trust, through the planning director, has, or through, I believe, Mr. Henry, has reached out to us to see if we will come back into the Affordable Housing Trust at their next meeting to discuss further how the Affordable Housing Trust can work with us to support this project going forward. And we intend to meet with them again at their May meeting. The Danvers Housing Authority has provided some additional information to us, some data. And if you could put the next slide up, please. This is information that was provided to us by Cindy Dunn, Executive Director of the Danvers Housing Authority. It is data accurate as of April 6th of 2023. And the Danvers Housing Authority itself has just two main programs for seniors on 14 Stone Street and the Perry Terrace. And interestingly, the state has a centralized wait list for seniors seeking housing through the Danvers Housing Authority, and there are 2,979 applicants on that list, of which 206 are Danvers residents. So again, there was some question as to the need. We have 206 on this state's centralized waiting list for Danvers Housing Authority affordable housing units. Within Danvers, 206 are identified as Danvers residents. Danvers Housing Authority does not have a preference for deaf, deafblind, near-deaf residents. However, as this indicates, the Housing Authority anticipates that some of its existing residents would benefit from the affordable housing in Danvers designed specifically for that demographic, for deaf, deafblind, or near-deaf folks. And it is entirely possible that folks from Danvers who are in Danvers Housing Authority properties would benefit and could move to this development, a development that's designed specifically 100% of the units designed to meet the needs and requirements of deaf, deafblind, and near-deaf residents. Finally, the board did receive comments from March from the Danvers town engineer, Stephen King. And our project engineer met with Stephen King to review his comments. Those were dated March 28th. In the normal course, this would typically happen in the review of a plan such as this. He issues comments. Typically, it goes to the planning board, but in this case, it went to the Board of Appeals as you're looking at the site plan. And our project engineer, Jesse Johnson, met with Stephen King. There were no issues that that remained outstanding that would not or could not be addressed, and all those issues will be addressed in the normal course of the stormwater management permit, of construction drawings as things go forward. But there were no issues on his memo that were a problem for us to respond to, and there was agreement with the town engineer that they would be responded to in the normal course of creation of more detailed documents and plans as we file for stormwater permit, as well as the construction building permits, orders of conditions, and that sort of thing. So I think that brings us up to date as far as what we've accomplished, which is quite a bit in responding to all of the comments we believe that we received at the last meeting from the board and from members of the public, as well as other comments we've received since that last meeting. And I would like to turn this over now to Steve Sacco, Chairman of the Board of New England Home for the Deaf, to respond to comments with regard to needs and the residents themselves. And then after that, we would like to have our project architect get right into the plans and the revised plans that were submitted to you. So,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Good evening. Stephen Sacco, Chairman of the New England Homes for the Deaf Board of Trustees. Could I have the next slide? Next one. Nope, I'm sorry, go back. Back one. There we go. I'm an accountant, so I'll start you off with a few quick statistics. The World Health Organization has determined that there are 5% of the world's population are deaf, including those who are hard of hearing. The Mass Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing tells us there's 1.4 million deaf people in Massachusetts, including hard of hearing. In June, the Deaf Seniors of America will have their annual conference in Florida, and they are anticipating 2,000 attendees. Now, those would be not hard of hearing, but people born deaf and culturally deaf, as we say. And that's just a small fraction of the country's population of deaf. As an organization in the business of long-term care, New England Homes is well aware of recent trends and government programs supporting the idea of people aging at home and having more care at home than in long-term care facilities. We have to keep up with that. This project will allow healthy, independent deaf people to live on our campus, where as they age, they will have access to the higher level of care that we can offer without ever leaving the campus. The architectural and electronic features of the proposed building will be attractive to them, as well as the fact that it will be a community where American Sign Language is the primary language used. Much like any other language-based culture, this truly is a culture. People tend to be with those who are similar. So if it was a group of Spanish-speaking people, they would gravitate towards a community of Spanish-speaking. The same thing applies here. But these are independent people. They are from all walks of life. Any profession you can think of, there are deaf people in that profession. A quick story, and then I will finish up. We had at one time, back when I first joined the board 26 years ago, the then director of the New England Homes told me that she had visited a resident in a hearing nursing home. This is a deaf person who was in a hearing nursing home, and she was isolated. She couldn't communicate. She really didn't have friends. She was on hospice care at this time, and really had given up. We convinced the family to bring her to New England Homes, where she was in our rest home, and she thrived. And nearly 20 years later, she was still with us. I tell you that story, and there are many other similar stories, but I tell you that just by way of explaining how the culture really makes a difference, to be with people who speak the language, who understand, and such. So, if there are no questions, I promised I would be brief, and I will turn it over to, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mr. Sacco, you did mention, you know, this is a community that you'll be able to provide care. So how does that work? Is it a visiting doctor? Or, I mean, I understand the facility's geared for deaf and partially deaf people, but how does the care aspect work of
Okay,
it?
and I don't mean to imply that the people who will live in this new building will be requiring care. They do not. They'll be healthy, you know, much like ourselves. But as they age, as their needs increase, they could transfer to the rest home or to the nursing home if they had more acute needs, without ever leaving the campus. So it's.
So they'd come out of these new apartments and into the Thompson house or something else?
Exactly, so we refer to it as a continuum of care. Right on our campus, we have
Okay.
levels, and this would be independent. I mean, they'll have their own cars, they'll have jobs, they'll, you know, everyday people, but they're deaf, and they'll be in a community of like-minded people that use the same communication method.
Okay, and before you step off, anyone else have questions for Mr. Sacco? Because I have one additional. So, and this one, you know, I've read a lot about this project from all facets, whether it's our own housing authority, our housing trust, our planning department, and all the literature that was submitted. I come back to, and you as someone who's on the board of directors of NEHD, why win? I guess I'm not making the connection there, where NEHD is the authority in this area. You had someone like Helen Keller, a very prestigious person, sit on the board over 100 years ago. Wynn, to me, has no experience in this area. And you guys are the experts in this area, so why get together with Wynn? Where is the benefit there?
Okay, that one's easy. I'm an accountant, okay? We do not have the expertise in the area of development and construction, or even looking forward, management of the property. We have the expertise in the needs, you know, the culture, the language, the architectural needs. So we partnered with Wynn because they have the expertise as far as development, architecture, construction, and so on. But they also, right in the beginning, made a point of learning from us about the architectural needs. We actually have two architects on our board. One is deaf himself, both retired architects. So they had a lot of input into this. And then Wynn sent a team to Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., where they learned even more from architects there. So I don't know that we would have found another firm that would have gone to those lengths to learn about this. We can't build it ourselves. We don't have the expertise. One way or another, we needed a development company to help us, and I am absolutely convinced we made the right choice.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, now we will turn you over to the other Steve on our team. He can tell you about architecture.
First, to pass around if you like. That one's a little heavy on the bottom
Okay.
there.
Yeah, I think this slide here is really just about who the mission is serving, and that's hard of hearing, deaf, and deafblind people. That's what we'll get into tonight about the specific aspects of the building that cater to those needs. Can I have the next slide, Brian? So I think we heard a lot of feedback last month, and this is Steve Prestigion again, Cube 3 Architects, project lead. And we heard a lot of feedback from you, the board. We heard a lot of feedback from the community, and we wanted to kind of revise our goals based on that feedback. And a lot of them kind of went hand in glove. We just learned that maybe we weren't meeting those goals to the level of sufficiency we wanted. So I think, first and foremost was finding ways to improve the response of the building to the context around it, to the context of being a New England coastal building. What we heard a lot of was the desire to explore alternative roof styles. We're hearing that, pitched roofs are more desirable from a stylistic standpoint than some of the flat parapets you were seeing. We heard a lot of feedback about the colors and the maybe commercial feel of what you previously saw. And we wanted to, again, which we'll hit on tonight, make sure that the building and 100% of its units are designed for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing. Next slide. I won't dwell on this too long. I know we're trying to focus on new material tonight, but just to situate everybody again with the site plan, the campus on the left, Water Street on the left, Jacob's Landing to the right side, and all the constraints that we've covered ad nauseum at this point. Again, I won't reiterate this too much. I think we've really just wanted to spell out again and clarify the split in height between the buildings. So this is, as Nancy mentioned, a mix of a 4-story and a 3-story building. The 4-story building facing the NEHD campus is outlined in red, and the 3-story portion facing Jacob's Landing is outlined in blue, facing Plan East. Next slide. This is the northwest elevation. We'll start here. We're going to go before and after through each elevation, and we'll go counterclockwise around the building. So this is the side facing NEHD's campus. Again, we heard a lot of reaction to the colors, the kind of dark neutral tones, the flat parapets, and just the overall feel and height of the building, as well as we started to really dig in after that to the height of the drop-off area as well, and just the kind of overall scale and feel of the building. Next slide. So this is where we've landed. You can see some precedent imagery on the top page here. We looked at some buildings of a style and scale that we're going for here. And then it's a little dark. The top image on the right is of the condo building on Water Street, where we thought about that material a little bit and whether we could take inspiration from it for this revised scheme. So the building on the bottom is the same elevation you just previously saw with our current design. We really transitioned from what was before a base building and 3 stories above it to really a base middle top. And at the 4th story, what we've started to do is treat it as a gambrel roof that encompasses the entire 4th story. So that starts to really visually reduce the impact of the building height. It really starts to read as 3 stories in a roof rather than a pure 4-story building, except for in the middle there where you see the white shiplap portion. That's really where the building entry is. That's the front door. That's what we really needed to stand out, just for visual clarity and operational clarity. Another thing we did is that covered drop-off. We looked at bringing the height of that down. So in the previous elevation, you saw that porte cochere was 2 stories tall, which seemed a little out of scale. We found a way to bring that out of the roadway so that fire trucks would be able to pass, and brought that down to a single story. Really quickly about the materials, which you'll see as we go around the building. The base is a field stone, which is the heavy sample I provided with you on the bottom there. We're looking at yellow lap siding along the majority of the 2nd and 3rd story with some white panelization between, and a shingle style roof. So that'll be like a shingle material, a darker lap siding panel, and you can see those gambrels where the 4-story units are getting their windows and their natural light. Next slide. So now we're moving counterclockwise. This is where left to right you see the 4-story portion of the building step down to 3. This is again the elevation you saw last month. And you'll start to see on the next slide how we started to turn the language. And so we're having a continuity of detailing here on the 4-story on the left side of this elevation. A similar treatment in trim boards, panels between windows, fascias, the base. We're changing the colors a little bit to help manage, where that is a 4-story portion, we wanted to help manage the size of it as it turns and as that change in wall plane occurs between the yellow and the white on the left. You can start to see how we've changed our approach to the 3-story portion on the right side, and I'll dig into that a little more on the next elevation if we jump to the next one. This is turning the corner, so this is the side really facing Jacob's Landing. And I think we heard a lot about these finned elements, these angled walls and the repetition of them and how they started to feel a little monolithic, especially because of the shared roof line of the cornices. So on the next slide, I can dig into our new approach here. Again, we have just some inspirational images on the top, just some colonial style New England homes. We wanted to think of this similar to last time as a kind of series of townhouses in the way we're kind of laying out the exterior and articulating the colors and the paint and the forms. So we started to do that here a little more deliberately with more changes in color. You can see we switched to a pitched roof that starts at about the midpoint of the roof and slopes down towards the neighbors. And shed dormers kind of operate as the third story there. And that's, again, how units are getting their natural light in their floor area. As we turn to the next elevation, this is just turning that corner. You can see the 3-story portion terminate and step back up. This is the old elevation again. And on the next slide, you can see how that 3-story portion comes and meets, and the building steps back up as it reaches the riverside. And we kind of pick that language back up from the NEHD elevation. I just want to run through a couple more before and afters. These are the perspectives you saw last time. This is the view from Water Street. This is the condo building in the foreground that I had a screen grab of earlier. That's the old building scheme in the background. And on the next slide, you can start to see the heightened relationship of the roof line. A lot of these pitched gambrels that you see and shed dormers that you see on these 2 foreground buildings, you can make out in the background there. So you can get a sense of the lack of height impact as well as the kind of continuity of the roof character. Next slide. This is the old site entry view. I won't dwell on this too long. Thanks, Brian. So this is the campus. This is the nursing home in the middle foreground here. And we just wanted to outline for you the difference between the 3 and the 4-story portion as we move up to the next slide. You can just jump to the next one, Brian. You can get a little bit more of a feel for how the form's looking, the massing, the sloping of that 4th-story wall to make that gambrel roof, the materiality, the shiplap in the middle, the fieldstone on the base, the trim board detailing. So all these subtle things, we're trying to create meaningful connections to what is in the area. And I think the next one just highlights the 4-story portion. We can jump to the third view. This is that view from Jacob's Landing that we saw last time. And in the next view, you can see a pretty dramatic change in the visual height. Just because of that, because of the 4th and 3rd story roof that encompasses those levels, we're really bringing down the apparent height of the building. And again, just to reiterate, in the foreground here are 2 rows of evergreens that we will be planting as a visual screen for the residents. And then again, just designating the 3 and 4 story for you. We heard a lot last time, just 2 more slides, and then I'll be able to turn it over to questions to the board and the community. We heard a lot of questions about the life safety features of the building. So we did engage a code consultant and put together what building code would require. So that's on the left column here. You can see we would be required to do smoke and carbon monoxide alarm system that you would see in any building. We would only be required 2% of our total units to be designed for deaf and hard of hearing people. So that includes visual alarms, visual notification devices to notify occupants of calls or knocks at the door, as well as some low-frequency audible notification devices and other visual and tactile appliances such as bed shakers, which would be optional but would be recommended by code. Lastly, exit signs would need to include braille and tactile letters located adjacent to the exit doors. So on the right side, I think what we really want to drive home is this building will be safe and will vastly exceed these requirements. So first and foremost, an emergency action plan will be prepared in cooperation between the developer and manager and emergency services. So this will establish protocols. It will establish the fire department's awareness of the people that are living in this building, their specific needs. There will be no confusion in the event of an emergency of what the action plan is. Again, of course, smoke and carbon monoxide. Really what we want to drive home is 100% of the units will be designed with those hearing impaired features. So every unit in this building, because of the demographic we're serving and the overall mission of the project, will meet those requirements. Anything that's recommended by code, such as those tactile notification appliances like a bed shaker, those will be stored on site. They will be able to be installed at the tenant request. Any receptacles that are necessary for that equipment will be installed day one. beyond just exit signage, all signage in the building will include Braille, other tactile letters. And then I think what we've mentioned before is, and we want to remind everybody, is we're doing 10-foot wide corridors, which are well in excess of the 5-foot minimum, and that's to allow ease of communication between people using ASL as they walk down corridors. So again, all of these features will make this building safe by any standard in the state, and they will be vetted during our building permit application that we're meeting all these. Last thing I wanted to hit on was just the question of the rooftop equipment. Of course, we're pretty early on here in the design. It's a concept design, but just based on wind projects that we've worked on them with of similar size and scale in this area, we gave you an example of a Mitsubishi heat pump system. That's basically what the unit condenser would be on the roof for each unit. In the middle is just a basic decibel chart that kind of explains in decibels what the level of impact is. It's maybe a little hard to read, but I'll explain in a moment. So the sound pressure level of this particular piece of equipment, that's 58 decibels when you're 10 feet away. And basically what we did was we took half of the total condensers for the project, and we assumed the kind of half that are closest to the abutters, and we took the closest possible point that any one of these pieces of equipment could have from an abutter, which is 230 feet. So when you add up all those decibels and you factor for the distance, that's a decibel level of 49.3. So that's below the level of a conversation, an in-room conversation. That's, on that chart, it's below the third block as far as the noise impact. And I think what we want to be clear on is it'll be either comparable to that or less, because we're being as conservative as possible with these estimations. We're not accounting for the height of the equipment on the roof. We're not accounting for the fact that those pitched roofs you saw and the elevations will actually screen this equipment, so it won't be directly air to air to an abutter. And I think the way we're looking at it is we're pretty confident in all of these. We can reliably say that the equipment total on the building will not have any real impact on the neighbors. And if anything does come up, we're happy to explore screening or other opportunities when that arises.
And just to be clear, so none of these are shown in the current renderings?
No.
And about approximately how many of these would be on the rooftops?
There will be one for each unit, 140.
So the entire roof is going to be populated with these?
In the center of the roof, yes. Especially because the building is so wide, they won't be visible from the ground. And again, they will be behind. They'll be behind
Can you please hold your comment, please? Thank you.
Again, in those renders on the Jacob's Landing side, it's behind the pitched roof. So the portion of the pitched roof behind it is a flat roof that's,
Okay.
a level below. So all the equipment's kind of behind
And
the
you said there
third-story
is an
units.
opportunity to screen them as well if
Yes,
needed?
and we're
Okay.
already doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Brian, could you pull up the Jacob's Landing new render, please? I'll try to take the mic here. So this third-story pitched roof here, the depth of that roof is half of the width of the building. So behind this is a flat roof that's at about this level, and that's where our equipment's located.
So it'll be down below.
It'd be down below.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay.
it'd be behind everything you're seeing here.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're good to jump ahead, Brian. I think that was just about all we had. Yep, I think we just wanted to end here and give it back to the board for questions. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Anybody, questions on the architectural plan? Katie, Corrine? Ken, you good online there? He's still with us. I hope. Okay. Next.
I think that's it for us. We are happy to answer any questions that you may have. We do have our full team here, and we can answer any questions with regard to the project, with regard to our responses, what we are seeking from a zoning standpoint as part of the application.
All right, thank you, Attorney McCann. I'm going to hold my questions to the end, hoping Most of my fellow board members ask them for me, so I'll start down there with you, Jeff.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
That's not a good start, come on. Ken?
The only question I had after seeing the Mitsubishi units was, where they were located. So he pointed that out for me. That's all I had.
Very good. Corinne?
I have a couple questions about the affordability component of this project. According to the minutes from the last meeting, it stated that they're in 2 phases, deeply affordable and an affordable tier. In the deeply affordable, it stated that for an individual, it was $24,000 a year, and for a two-income or two-person income is $27,000. And then it goes up to $48,000 and $55,000 for the straight affordable tier. I have clients who have constructed apartment complexes in Danvers and also in other communities, and they're having a hard time finding people, first of all, finding outfits or organizations that provide either lotteries or help them find people that will qualify to be in these units. So my question is, does Wynn have a track record of dealing with this affordability component at this level? Like 50% is pretty significant as far as the building goes, plus you have the affordability component, you have the deaf and near-deaf component, and you also have the 55 component. So my fear is that with all of these restrictions, including the affordability, what happens if after a year you're still struggling to find people to, I guess, comply with all of these in order to, sign a lease and be able to live here?
Adam?
Hi, my name is Adam Stein with Wynn Development. So the first question of do we have experience? So Wynn Companies has been around for 50 years. It's a 50-year-old privately held company. The company has originated and still continues to be one of the largest manager. It's actually the 9th largest in the country of affordable housing. That's all we do. So on the development side, we've developed about 20,000 units in our portfolio that have a mix of incomes, affordable, middle market. And then on the management side, they're the 9th largest in the country, so we manage our own fee-owned assets, and we manage for other third parties that develop affordable housing, but don't have the capacity to manage in terms of compliance and lease-up and lottery and all the qualifications that you're describing. So we believe there's a market. We've done some market study work, not just through the Danvers Housing Authority, but with third-party market consultants, which we can share with you. And from a financing standpoint and an underwriting standpoint, if there wasn't a strong demand for this, it wouldn't get awarded. So we strongly believe there's a market for it, not only in the Essex, county area, but also in the town of Danvers. And we have a vast experience in affordable housing. So, in the income tiers you're describing, that's the 30% and the 60%. I don't know if we want to share the market study work, but that's a huge demand for those incomes. And this is all rental, not for sale. So I don't know what your conversations have been relative to rental or for sale, but I think on the rental side, it's a little bit different in terms of demand and
Well, these are rental.
good, okay.
And I guess, and again, I think in our state and I think across the country, there's been this big push towards including affordable housing, and for a good reason, because people need it. But if, for example, in Massachusetts, you can either live in subsidized housing or you can apply for the voucher program. But I just found out that you have a 10-year wait once you get on the list to be, I guess, awarded a voucher. So you could very well have many, many people that are well under, that meet all of the requirements, but they're either not in a voucher program or they don't meet one of the other criteria in order to have this type of housing. And that's what I'm concerned about. For example, what if you had someone who was part of the deaf community, but they couldn't afford they couldn't afford an apartment that wasn't a subsidized one, but they didn't meet any of the affordability, or they're on the voucher list, but it's gonna take 10 years. What happens to that person?
Well, I think the good news is we have all the tiers that you described. We have 30s, we have 50s, we have 80s, and then we have unrestricted. So people that make more than qualify for those affordability rentals. So I don't know, I look at it as we're doing everything we can to capture that wide market by having all these different income tiers. And you use the word subsidize, and I don't want to turn this into an affordable housing discussion, but the way we're financing this, they're not subsidized in terms of vouchers today. We get resources from the state in the form of tax credits. We sell those tax credits. Those tax credits infuse equity into these projects. That allows us to drive much less debt, and we can offer rents at a lower level. But the residents that live at this community will pay their rent. They're based on income, and they're based on a percentage of their income towards rent. So it's tied to 30% of their income goes to pay the rent. So I just want you to, there may be some people that show up with vouchers, and if that works for them, that's great, but that's not the basis for the financing of this project.
And of those 206 residents of Danvers who are on that list, would those 206, would they comply with your requirements, and would they be able to move in as soon as the project was completed?
We would have to do an income check. So one of the reasons why Wynn Residential, who's the management arm of Wynn, is tied into this project is because they have the capacity to do all income certifications. So they have to share their incomes with the management company to make sure that they fit in the 30, 50, 60, 80, or unrestricted unit. So we would have to income qualify all the residents that look to apply here.
Okay, and Danvers residents would still be given that second preference?
Second preference after deaf-blind,
Yes.
hard of hearing, correct.
Yes. Okay,
That's right.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And these are good questions, worth a talk through. Thank you.
Do you have additional questions?
I'm all set, thank you.
I'm going to go out to you, Ken Javanen, online. Questions? Is Ken still with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead,
Ken.
Ken. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
I was just wondering about about rounded corners and feature as well, a safety feature inside the building.
Right back up. So the question was whether they'll be provided?
And see it in this presentation of changes of the safety feature on the safety mentioned that, but I was wondering if you're going to have rounded
Yeah.
hallways so people can't get trapped in a corner. They can stay around.
Yep, the answer is yes. We'll have about 6-foot radii on interior turns in any of the corners of the corridor.
Okay. Is that all you had, Ken?
It is a little choppy tonight.
Yeah. See on frozen screen? Okay. I'll move on to, Ken, do you have any additional questions?
Nope, all
Okay.
set. Sorry,
Thank-
the internet's very fun.
Thank you. Katie?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. And Attorney McCann, Corinne Doherty had asked, I wanted to clearly understand the pecking order of applicants. So we're all aware it's
Yep.
preference of over 55.
No,
That-
over 55 is not a preference. Everyone must be over
Okay,
55.
sorry.
So that's-
Everyone's over 55.
all right.
First slot's going to deaf or partial deaf.
Deaf, blind, or near deaf.
Okay.
That is the first preference. Second preference is Danvers residents.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So if there is a person outside of Danvers that is deaf-blind, they're going to get in over a Danvers resident?
Yes,
Okay. And the third criteria is?
there is no third
There is,
criteria.
so just those
Right.
two.
So if you happen to be a deaf Danvers resident, and I mentioned that the Danvers Housing Authority thinks it may already have some folks in their existing housing that would meet that requirement, right to the top.
But those residents that are currently in Danvers housing would still have to go through a financial verification?
Oh, sure,
Yep.
everybody would, yes.
Okay.
But everybody's over 55. Everyone will have to meet the income qualifications at the different tiers. And Adam made a good point that we do have the different tiers of affordability, which most projects, and I think all projects that this board has seen, typically have 80% AMI. Sometimes you see 60% AMI, but for a standard quote-unquote affordable project, it's 80% of AMI. And there are a lot of folks who need housing that don't necessarily meet that requirement. So we're offering the tiers of 30%, which is very unusual to offer housing for those making 30% of the area median income, and then, or less, and 50 to 60%, and then 80%, and then market rate. So that 50% of our units is going to be in that tiered affordability, which is unusual for a project, but it also allows us to reach out to more folks who might qualify for this housing. And as far as WIN's expertise and experience in this area, it is quite significant. And I know from experience, and it sounds like Board Member Doherty has clients as well, who do an affordable project or are required to provide an affordable unit in a development, and they have no idea how to get that unit qualified through the state to be on the SHI, and it becomes a real burden for the developer. That's why WIN is part of this development team. They have that experience. They know how to do it. They have the connections and the abilities to work within the state in order to get those units qualified quickly and promptly, and to get through the selection process and income verification that other smaller developers just simply don't have. And it can become a burden, but it's not a burden for WIN because they know how to do it.
Okay, and if I, also in reviewing the minutes, if I understand this correctly, so WIN and NEHD are entering, let me see if I get this right. This is a land contract, so NEHD owns the building or the land or both? And is this a contractual agreement? And is there a certain amount of time on it?
This is a land development agreement that these two entities have entered into. NEHD owns the property, and then WIN will be providing its expertise for the not only the construction and the development and pulling the consultants together to get even to this point, which is not something that NEHD has expertise in, and then operationally, who is going to manage these rental units. WIN will be providing that expertise in managing day-to-day operations.
Is there a timeline on that? Is it a 40-year agreement? Is it a 20-year agreement? Correct.
So it's not infinite, right? We have a time limit. So if you think about the players in this, you have a landowner who's New England Homes, you have a developer who's WIN Development, and then you have an owner of the building, which is a joint venture between WIN and New England Homes. Both owners, co-owners. So we're going to work with New England Homes to develop the building, and that building is going to lease it from New England Homes for a period of 99 years. So the ground lease is going to be in effect for 99 years. We have a development agreement between WIN and New England Homes. We've been working on this project for close to 2 years. There is a period of time at which allows us to go through this process with the board and the community. It allows us to do everything that Nancy described, all the due diligence, engineering, architectural work. It allows us to make applications to the state. DHCD is the primary funding agency. And to get through that process, that could be a year process. By the time we make an application to DHCD and get an award, that could be a year. At some point, that agreement between Wynn and New England Homes will end. It'll either work or it won't. Everything we're doing today is to progress the deal forward in a way that it will be ready for an application to DHCD. If that
Very
answers,
good.
that answers your
Thanks.
question. Yeah.
And Attorney McCann, you know, as we here are aware, we are acting as the planning board as well as zoning on this particular project due to our bylaws. I understand there's a detailed lighting plan,
Yes.
but we're not experts in this area, as we don't handle that very often. My question is, you know, you talk about cutoff and dark sky and these types of things. This is in writing. I suppose it's part of what you're submitting. If changes are needed or need to occur, are you back before us for that? Or is this, geez, we erred on this calculation, we submitted light poles of a certain height, they need to be lower, or they need to be higher? Explain that a little bit to us.
Okay. So as part of the package, you received a full site plan with all of the many sheets. Part of that was a photometric plan that had what we call cut sheets, which are the details of the lighting fixtures. That's what we are proposing, and that's what you would be approving as part of the package. If we make any changes, this is what happens with every project that goes through planning board site plan review. Any changes that are made, it's reviewed with planning staff and determined whether that is something that needs to go back to the planning board, and in this case, come back to the zoning board for review to modify. And what I advise my clients is, we're submitting what you're going to build. And if there are changes, you should anticipate that you're going to be going back to the Board of Appeals.
Okay.
And that's just in the normal course.
And does that hold true on the landscaping side? Because
Yes.
again, that's another area this board typically does not deal in. I understand in meeting with the neighbors, we came up with these, you know, I call them arborvitae walls, for lack of a better technical term, but you know, we can't sit here and tell you, geez, we would like this type of hedge or this type of screening. I guess maybe I go out to Brian on this. I'm assuming the planning board would have highlighted if there was a hole here, or the planning department as well. Is that the correct way to understand this on the landscaping side?
So, the staff instructed the planning board to basically go through site plan review as if they were going through site, like as if it was theirs.
Okay.
So you have to rely on their recommendations. If you require more, I know, you know,
Okay, and
you're,
that
you're
le-
allowed to do that, but they didn't, we were just looking, they didn't mention anything about the lighting.
And
I
that
can
was that
only-
prior letter we got?
Right, I can
Okay.
only assume that they didn't have a problem with it.
Okay.
But, you know.
And Attorney McCann, I only bring this up because we've kind of been bitten by this a couple times, where applicants weren't held to any plan, and we had no recourse. We couldn't, you know, we couldn't get them to adjust that plan because it wasn't in writing, or it wasn't an actionable item for this board or even our planning department.
Right. We did meet with the planning board so that they could make recommendations to you, and we made a full presentation of the site plan to them as if we were presenting to them in what would otherwise be the quote-unquote normal course. What happens once the building is under construction? There are obviously reviews by town departments throughout the whole construction. But before an occupancy permit is issued, it's typically planning staff, but planning staff with the building inspector goes through with the plan that's been approved and makes sure. Are all the trees there? Are they the right kind? Are they the right size? And if they're not, that holds up an occupancy permit.
Okay, I'm a little concerned that this lengthy wait list doesn't seem that lengthy to me to fill 140 units, but I'm gonna maybe save that one for comments. Are there any additional questions out of the board before I'm gonna wrap this up, and we're gonna read a letter in, and then I'll turn it over to public. Go ahead, Corinne.
Just one question. Getting back to the affordability component, obviously, half of the units are going to be part of the affordability, but do you have discretion with regard to what category they fall in, or does it have to be an equal split between the three?
It does not have to be an equal split between the three. The state will require, I believe it's 13% be 30% or below AMI. The rest, we have a general idea of what it's going to be as a mix, but for the funding source, it's 13 or 13.5%. Has to be the 30% AMI or below.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions out of the board? Ken, online, are you good? You can give me a thumbs up.
I'm good.
Okay, we're good. All right, we're going to throw it out to the public, but we first have one letter that was submitted to us that we're going to summarize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a letter here from Ed Reed of 12 Jacobs Landing, received April 7th of this year. It's a long letter. In summary, he's in favor of the project. He met with the development team, and he says, with the redesigned roof line, I don't have any problem with the zoning board granted any HD, the variances they are looking for. The new design will work for any HD and has addressed the neighborhood's concerns about the look of the building. Signed, Ed Reed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, please, new comments, and we'll have the public come over here to this mic. We'll start with you, Gardner, in the back.
Good evening, everyone. Gardner Trask. I'm here representing the Danvers Housing Affordable Trust. I know that you since have received the letter that was promised to you, and you have it in place. Just a couple of points based on tonight's discussion. The Danvers Affordable Housing Trust has been established since 2011, and in that time, we've helped develop 175. We've fostered, partnered, facilitated work to get 175 new affordable housing units in town. And while I appreciate that small developments, new people new to the process, often have difficulty understanding and getting through the DHCD processes, we've not had problems with larger developers who've skilled at this. They know how to do it. They know how to do the income verification. They know how to run a lottery. They know how to advertise. The DHCD doesn't delineate between large and small. So the problem is the small onesie-twosies have to go through exactly the same process that these large developers have to. This is not a voucher program at this point. It's not a Section 8. I don't want people to confuse low income with affordability. That's a whole different discussion, different time, but that's not what this is. I understand there was a concern about the number 200 and something on the list. That's 200 and something who've applied for housing. That's not to say a family who lives in town might want to downsize, might want to give up their main residence and go to a community that helps them. The list isn't constrained to that 200 and X amount. Other than that, I again reiterate that the Housing Trust supports this effort and would hope that the board would see fit to pass it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, right here in the front. Right there. Green sweater. Yep.
Hello, my name is Bernie Mazur, and I live at 27 North Shore Ave. And the last time I was up here, I mentioned this, and I'm going to go over it again. I'm talking about traffic and the problem with traffic. Nobody has ever mentioned anything about traffic over here. We talked about, and I'm amazed that this 4-story building has now come down to 3, but it's still 4. So it's a half and half building, I guess, now, so I don't know what that's all about. But that was an issue the last time. I'm also surprised that there's not more residents here from the community, okay? Because this could have a big impact on what goes on. And in addition to that, I don't know if they're aware, but I heard that the Carmelite is closing. So if the Carmelite closes, there's a prime piece of property there that I'm sure Wynn would love to grab a hold of, okay? Because you got waterfront, you got forest, you got everything back there. It's going to be perfect. You could put 250 units in there if you want, which, again, is going to impact the traffic. And that traffic study they did doesn't help me at all, traveling up and down that road. And they talk about an access road that's gonna come out of there. And I asked the question, when they come out of that access road, are they gonna have the ability to go left? Okay, because if you have the ability to go left, we're gonna have traffic accidents, unless you put another light, which is gonna be 100 yards from the other light, okay? This whole thing about the traffic is going to be a nightmare for us, the residents in this community, okay? Now, maybe they don't care, and maybe they do, because I'm surprised there's not more people here talking about this, okay? But this could be a big issue, okay? And another thing, I love the fact that they had a wait list that went from 100 to 30. If you have people that are on a 30 wait list, you don't need a 4-story building to put those 30 people in. So is this a money grab, okay? Or are these the greatest humanitarians that ever set foot on the earth, wanting to take care of the deaf people, okay? I just don't understand that. I think that there has to be more review into the traffic pattern on this and not just let it go and let it slide, okay?
Thank you. Sure. Just identify yourself, please.
Sure. Jesse Johnson, Weston and Sampson Engineers. We're the civil engineer and traffic engineering consultants on this project. I did do a full presentation last time on the traffic. I would just like to reiterate that we did do a full traffic study. We did submit it. We didn't get any comments back that asked us to change what we had for assumptions for future build out of not only our project, but the background growth on Water Street, as well as the other projects that have been discussed that are going to be coming online by 2031, which was that future year that I kept talking about, that will have the other projects in Peabody that will be constructed by them. All their traffic impacts were looked at that light. Our traffic impacts were looked at that light. And overall, by just our project coming on to that roadway system, we are a 2% increase in total volume. So if you think about that, 50 trips in the peak hour for over 2,500 trips, it's minimal. And what it does cause is, yes, it changes the delay, which is what you look for at a level of service at an intersection or at the light. So there's different classifications, A being the best, that's the best level of service, and a 0 to 10 second time slot that you're sitting there waiting. That light intersection has different levels of service, A, B, and C. We don't have a change that's bigger than 11 seconds, and that is actually for turning into our own project, our own site. So nothing that impinges anybody else turning at that intersection. They're all averaging about 1 to 5 second increases.
Thank you.
That's it. Sure.
I'll go with the white shirt there, yes.
Yeah, Alan Fiorenti, 18 Jacobs Avenue. This is my 7th meeting dealing with this issue.
If you could just come a little closer to the mic.
Counting the wetlands meetings, this is about my 7th meeting. The previous concessions they've made so far is no road on Jacobs Avenue, no traffic down through Jacobs Avenue with the new development, including construction access through that end of the property. They moved the parking lots from not abutting against the Jacobs Avenue properties, but to around the building. They rotated the building so it doesn't affect Jacobs Avenue, Jacobs Landing. It faces the nursing home. And they agreed to not to have an outside sound system. But the latest concerns that the neighborhood, Jacobs Avenue, but not Jacobs Landing, brought up was address the possibility of historical site, the noise from the HVAC system, the lighting issues. The people thought 4 stories was too high. And the final issue was, you say deaf, blind, near death, and 55 and older. How long is this agreement in effect, and can either party leave the agreement?
Well, I think Attorney McCann spoke to that, so that.
Can anybody terminate the agreement and then it changes?
No, I can answer that. I believe I got it right, and Attorney McCann will correct me if I'm wrong, but because they're asking for a special permit, this will be deed restricted,
All this
and
stuff
that
will be in the
requirement
deed.
will be there forever. So there always will have to be 55 and over and deaf or near deaf as a priority, and I believe I have that correct.
So
I'm
if
getting a nod, so.
they have to come before the zoning board?
if they would ask for to vacate or modify the existing special permit. If the request was to do that, yes, they would come before this board in order to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
I can
And the
possibly
way
work
that-
as an intern for you.
Yeah, even better, the bylaw as it's drafted now, we could not ask this board to eliminate the senior component,
Right.
because that would be a use variance, which this board doesn't have the authority to grant. So special permit is for senior housing only, and then the preferences would be the conditions that you would put on, and those remain with a deed restriction.
Okay. Thank you. Additional public comment? Yeah, right, sorry, yeah, I'll go with you right in the front. Sure. Just identify yourself and your address, please.
My name, Chris Farron. I'm on 8 Jacobs Landing. So, a little bit of the selfishness, first of all, I'll go through is our house is probably the closest to the development with our second floor bedroom windows that face directly against that space, okay? Some of the concerns I have is as they go through the construction, you know, our hill abuts right up against where they're gonna be doing the construction. What happens as they go through that construction and do the clearing of all the space and we get shifting of the soil? Because that whole landing was all fill, right? What happens when we start to get damage to foundation shifting? We have those type of damages, things like that are going to happen during the construction. Who's going to be liable to help us with that if we have damage to the construction timeframe? First of all.
Okay, Attorney McCann, you want to respond to that? So you're worried about soil movement, this type of stuff, and the effect on your foundation?
Yeah. Yeah, but the landing was filled. Right?
Okay.
That whole landing was filled.
Yep,
right?
we got it. Go ahead.
There were certainly soil samples and drilling and things like that for testing that Jesse can speak to, but the contractors, the developer, can't cause harm to a budding property. That's a civil matter that there would be responsibility to make sure that construction is done correctly and appropriately so that there isn't damage. It's no different than any other type of development.
Okay, thank you.
The second piece is stormwater. You know, so as you know, the ventilation and taking the water from that space in a space that's developed, you know, you're going to have parking lots and things like that that could come down towards ours, towards our property. I mean, this is right next door. We sit right next door to it, so we're looking right at the property. So. Just wondering about stormwater and what concessions are being made there. What's the plans to get that away from that space?
Sure. I can speak to that, and also the previous one. So one of the first steps that we did when we started looking at this site was do some soil testing. You probably saw the evidence of that when we had the site walk. There were some patches of the soil that had been disturbed. We took an excavator. We didn't do geotechnical work yet with a full boring rig that would be able to go down 30, 40 feet. But we had an excavator that went down 14 feet, and we went up at the height of land. So almost at that highest point adjacent to your property, we went down and found nothing for fill and found nothing for ledge or anything that we would be concerned about. If ledge was ever encountered, they actually do what's called a pre-blast survey, where they go into everybody's houses on the abutting properties within a certain diameter and actually survey the condition of your house and foundations to make sure that after the blasting operations would be done, there would be no change to it. We didn't see any evidence of any ledge anywhere, though. We did test holes throughout to see what the soils were. They were all native and they were sand, which is what you would expect next to a river.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm talking about down in our neighborhood in the landing where it was filled to put that in. Is that where the samples were taken, or was it in the hill behind?
No, we were on our
Hold on a second, hold
we were
on.
on our own property.
Hey, please address your questions to the chair, okay? That's how this works. You gotta ask through
I
the,
gotcha. So
through
he's
the
looking
board,
he's
and then
looking
I'll.
at me and speaking to me, so I was.
Yep, I'm just
giving
trying to
him
get
some-
everybody on the same page
Just
here.
giving him some courtesy, okay.
Yep.
Yep.
So you're more concerned about a fill area that's near your house, not
That's
your...
right. The landing itself, when it was built, was filled.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that's not the hill.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that we found nothing but evidence of native material within our region of our project. So we expect to find that throughout, and we're going to do geotech work after that to further explore that. To talk about the stormwater, one of the things that we are required to do as a civil engineer is to look at the existing drainage patterns and find out where the sensitive areas are, abutting properties to make sure we understand the drainage patterns that send runoff towards them, sensitive resource areas like the river or the wetlands. And we have to look at what those existing conditions are, understand how much water is going there today during all storm events, the rate that it goes there, and the volume of water, so 2 factors. And then I'm required to go into the post-construction and look at how that changes, because I'm adding pavement, I'm adding buildings, and I'm even changing cover types. I'm changing from grass field to manicured lawn in some instances. That generates more runoff. So I have to not only analyze the pattern pre, but post to the same exact points and prove to the reviewing engineers as a peer review that I've done everything to prove that I'm going to not exceed it or lessen it. So I've got to be able to treat it, and I've got to be able to mitigate it. I've got to be able to lessen it.
And those stormwater storage locations will change based on your findings, or they are already kind of set, like they're going to go in X, Y, Z spots?
So Attorney McCann had mentioned that we had conversations with
Town engineer,
and they were focused mostly on the stormwater, because what engineers usually go back and forth on are assumptions. You want to make sure that you all agree on what the existing soil conditions are, where groundwater is, where the things are that impact your designs, and then you also want to make sure you have the same approach on how you're going to mitigate it. What am I using for the menu, if you will, of different ways I could mitigate that stormwater? And I picked a way of doing an open basin that is towards the river, so that any overflow from that basin goes directly to the river and not towards any of the abutters. So we're not sending anything from a stormwater component from the parking, from the building, or anything towards any of the abutting properties. It's going to the basin and then to the river.
Okay. Does that answer your questions?
Yep.
Do you have additional questions?
Well, obviously, obviously all the things that have been brought up here about the lighting is definitely critical to us, because our bedrooms
Sure.
face that
Yep.
space, and, I'd like to obviously be able to make sure those are where they need to be. I see the arborvitaes. I think that's right up against the parking lot that's going to abut my property, so again, I'm very interested in that. But I would agree, I run a big plant in Danvers as well for Medtronic, and
Okay.
I understand about the HVAC and everything that has to be done there. I understand we're shielding it there, but 140 units is going to create, at 58 decibels. We'll see if that's really the case. That's the case, and I guess we would have to address that with the property if that's going to be.
Yeah, that would, that's something that sounds, if I'm hearing the applicant right, it's kind of in flux as far as if they screen or not screen those units, or is that something
No,
we
they're
can add as a
screened.
condition, or?
They're screened.
They're screened.
I'll speak
Okay.
to the lighting too, if I can. So,
Sure.
again, very sensitive to the abutters with our lighting design as well as our stormwater design. As we started to get around the corner closest to that abutter's property, near that pinch point, if you will, we turned all the lights. So we kept them low. All the light fixtures, pole-mounted light fixtures, are a maximum height of 15 feet. And what that does is that means we just have to use more of them. We could have gone higher and thrown more light, if you will, but we didn't want to go that high. We wanted to bring them down to something that's more residential in feel, 15 feet. And then we turn them and back shield them. So the lighting designers can back shield the light fixtures, which they are near that abutting property line, to throw all the light back in towards the property itself. So that was just
Does that
one of
make
the.
sense, the backlighting?
Anything else?
Any additional questions? Just come to the mic.
Just to go over what he was saying about the noise, we're on the water, so everything travels.
Sure.
So that was a huge concern of, noise pollution. Constantly listening to those generators.
Mm-hmm.
That was what we were concerned about.
I mean, I'm not, and nor is the applicant going to sit here and tell you there won't be some noise. I think there will. I think they're doing everything within their design to limit that. if I'm a neighbor, and I'm not, but we're here to speak for you, or give our opinion anyway, I would think if that, you find at the end of this that it's just unbearable, I believe the applicant would be willing to take additional steps. And I don't think they're gonna, given the amount of detail that's going into this project, I don't think they're gonna just turn their head against your concerns. But they have noted the decibel levels. I think the distance, the fact that they're buried on a roof where you can't even really see them. I'm not sure, short of burying them in the ground, I don't know what else they could do. So, any additional questions?
No, I just think her property sitting right behind the nice, down in the landing, decrease our property value as well, and that's a
Sure.
concern of
Yeah,
ours.
no, that's just slice of heaven. We get it.
That's right, it is, and that's why we moved down there, so.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right there, the blue shirt.
Trip Knox and Janice Knox, 11 Jacobs Landing, across the street from 12, our neighbors. First thing I would like to discuss is that all the needs of the community, all the needs of the state, all the needs of the House for the Deaf, and all the true needs for the seniors, for Danvers, and everybody that this facility would take care of, we are all in favor of. The problem is, it was brought up at the last meeting, we have to address what is the proper building to be built. I submitted a letter. I sent it certified. I hand-delivered it to the town. I'm surprised you guys don't have it. It mentioned and referred to the laws that apply to the variance that they're looking for. And it's clear in paragraph C and D, non-conforming use of residential zones shall be subject to restrictive standards than those of non-residential zones. It also states, to permit expansion of a non-conforming building, provided there's no demonstrable adverse impacts or adjoining properties or under Section 3, Paragraph F, type nonconformity, i.e., to have a different approach for uses, structures, and parking lots. My letter, which you obviously don't have, I don't know why, it was sent certified, I can prove that.
No, I'm sure we have it.
It's in the packet.
It's part of our package.
How come it wasn't read?
You're here to speak on it. If you're here to speak on it, we wouldn't read it in.
Okay.
But let me stop you there for a moment, because I just want to be clear. You could point to any bylaw in the town of Danvers and say, that's the bylaw, we shouldn't do it. This board sits up here to kind of weigh that and give our opinion. We're lay people, and we try to take in all the concerns of, number one, the neighborhood and whether it is detrimental or not, and what the applicant's looking to do. So if we're not here to serve that purpose, there would be no point in having a zoning board. So I understand our bylaw and I understand what is not permitted, but that's the, at least in my opinion, that's the purpose of the zoning board, is to sit here and try to understand, is this something that we feel kind of works in the neighborhood? So again, we're just here to give an opinion. We're taking your input, we're taking the applicant's input, and our own. So,
No, I fully understand that.
Okay.
And I'm talking to you as the board, I'm not talking to the.
yep, I got it.
All right, and I'm just pointing out to you that because of the bylaws you can add additional restrictions as the board.
That is correct, yes.
If you feel that is
Are
appropriate.
you looking for additional restrictions? And if so, just tell us what it is you'd like to see.
It says that here. And we're in don't.
Yeah, no, I've got you.
we're
You were in favor of it.
the project.
Yep.
But, you know, if they built 2 more buildings just like they had, everybody in this room would cheer. You know, they'd be wonderful. But to put a high-rise building in our neighborhood, and I've given you in my letter, if you read it into the minutes, you'll find on my letter there's a solution to what they can do. It costs more money, but there is a solution that would satisfy the neighborhood, and I think the board would be, be doing the right thing for the town. We want to do the right thing for the town, too. We want this approved. I'm not here arguing it not to be approved. I'm saying it can be done differently so that everybody can be happy, and everybody can understand and cheer for what the town is going to do and what the board is going to do. So I ask you, under these regulations, which you are duty to perform, to look at it. You mentioned it up the last meeting, I was here. It's too high. It's too high. It's still too high. And nobody today on the board had mentioned anything about it being too high. Maybe that's coming later, I don't know, but I have not heard it tonight.
Well, we're just going based off their presentation. We haven't deliberated yet.
Okay, all right. So we're behind the board, we support the board, but we also need to have you look at what you can do, because you do have the power.
Very good. Thank you. Additional public comment. Is that Cindy in the back? Yeah. And we've been at this about an hour and a half, and I like to think that people get oversaturated, so I would hope for no repeat comments, please.
Right. Cindy Dunn, the director of the Danvers Housing Authority. I know I spoke last time, and I don't want to repeat, but I just want to clarify a little bit of the data that I provided. We currently have 110 Danvers residents on the waiting list for just the Stone Street property. The one that's over here, 40 units, 3 to 5 year wait list now. The other properties I have throughout the state are 143 units with the 206 Danvers residents on it. It used to be when I started 17 years ago, I could tell a Danvers resident, 1 or 2 years, you'll be housed. 3 to 5 now. So there is a great need for more affordable senior housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And I already heard from you. I'm going to go here. Yep. White shirt. Yep. Yeah. Well, can we deliberate, or you want a break before that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Daly, North Shore Avenue, Danvers. This project was approved by the Danvers Housing Authority in May 2021. And we kept asking questions after we found out later on at the Conservation Commission meeting, when we found out they were doing all the surveying up there as to what was going on. It's too bad that we didn't get a little bit inkling as to what was going on a long time before this, especially about the size of the proposal. This started as a NEHD proposal, but mushroomed into a 144-story plus building for anybody over 55, after filling up as much for the New England Home for the Deaf and Blind people. Now it sounds like a 40B in disguise. June 16th, 1980, at a special town meeting, this area was changed from a Residence 1 to Residence 2 so that multifamily homes could not be built unless ZBA approved. Also, as you already know, the height restriction to 30 feet or 2 stories. The project should be downsized for low and moderate income availability, which now, by the way, there's several units that have been approved for the former Marriott Suites on Route 1 in Danvers. There's also units in Danvers Square where the old Suburban store was located. There's some unfilled units on Locust Street, and there's going to be 28 more at the corner of Maple and Hobart Streets. So I think the need for all these units is kind of exaggerated. There should be enough here for low and moderate apartments to keep us over 10% threshold for many years to come. I think that the Housing Authority didn't realize that this project would so negatively impact the Danvers Port area by the Waters River. Residents of Danvers Port worked closely with the planning board several years ago to develop a waterfront village district that cleaned up the north side of the bridge. Please don't decimate the south side. The building would adversely impact substantial homes located on Jacob's Landing. Also, because of the height of this building, a greater risk of fire hazard. There's constant examples of high-rise apartment buildings, fires on TV at least once every other week, Brockton, Arlington, Worcester, Boston, and you have deaf and blind people going into a 4-story building. Perhaps a complex of 50 to 80 apartments with a 50-50 split with NEHD would be sufficient rather than this big monstrous project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening.
Sandy Lane, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 3. I'm on a half a dozen different committees here in town. Been very active with this particular one. We've had many meetings with them, and they've made some very hard committals, and they've also made a lot of concessions to us. We spent an hour and a half last Friday, going over a lot of things, and they were very, very good, very gracious, explained things and all. I, for one, am for this project. But my other feeling is, since I am a town meeting member, that it was an unanimous vote by town meeting to limit 2 levels. And if you people vote against it and wipe out what town meeting did, then why do we need town meeting at all? And I think that's something you're going to have to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other additional public comment? If not, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. Go ahead, Attorney McCann, you want to respond to that?
Yes, I do. I have a couple responses to some of the last couple of speakers. Number one, it was mentioned that this is somehow under Section 3 of the zoning bylaw as a non-conforming use. This is not a non-conforming use at all. This is a use permitted. It is a permitted use by special permit under Section 30. And that does, a special permit does, as the chair recognized, you can put conditions on a special permit, but it has nothing to do with non-conforming uses or Section 30 at all. We meet all of the requirements under Section 30 for the grant of a special permit. Those were itemized in my application. We are seeking variances related to the height, as been discussed, and I want to bring out a couple of points here. As I mentioned in my introduction, I provided you with the elevations of the existing buildings on the New England Home for the Deaf campus, and this proposed building, while it is 3-story in part and 4-story in part, the highest point of it is going to be at an elevation 1 foot lower than the existing NEHD nursing home building itself. So this is not a high-rise. This is not a monstrous building. This is a building that will fit in well in the campus and will actually be at an elevation a foot lower than the existing buildings on the site. This is certainly not going to decimate the neighborhood. This is a beautiful building. The comments that we received from you at the last meeting, we took to heart, and we made some very significant changes to the appearance of the building to make this more residential in appearance, and providing the needed housing for the seniors that Mr. Trask and Ms. Dunn have spoken to as well. So we believe we have addressed the comments. We did receive the letter that was mentioned, that Mr. Knox mentioned, and the proposal, I'll speak very briefly, that he suggested was parking under the building. And we did look at that, and our engineer is here and can speak to that. It is not a viable option for this particular development, given the physical aspects of this property, water table levels, etc., but also, and importantly, for the viability of an affordable housing project. To have parking under is not financially viable. I've been involved in many projects over the years where developers will propose parking under until they find out how much it costs. And the project has to be financially viable, or why should we be here? And the final point with regard to our variance requests, you are here under 48 Section 10 with the power to grant dimensional variances. If you didn't have that power, you wouldn't be here, as you said, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
And we have to meet the requirements, the criteria for dimensional variances under 48 Section 10, and we do that. We meet it multiple times over. We have soil conditions affecting this property. We have shape affecting this property. We have location of existing buildings on the site, and we have soil condition, shape, and topography, as you saw on the site view, regarding this property that impact this site that do not generally affect properties located in this zoning district, as well as the 200-foot wide public utility easement that impact this site, that make it not possible to develop this property for uses that are permitted in this zoning district, which this use is permitted, without the variance that's requested. And we have demonstrated that the designs of the building that we're proposing allow you to grant those variances. We've met the hardship requirement. They allow you to grant the variances to allow the building to fit within the NEHD campus as well as the neighborhood generally. So with that.
Okay, and before we entertain deliberations, one thing I failed to bring up earlier, which I would like to see if you will take as a condition. I know when we did our site visit, we talked about the entrance, the new entrance, and the curb cut. And I would like to ask that a condition be met that not retaining wall.
Stone wall?
Stone wall, thank you, would be rebuilt and to mirror what is there now in its look and shape, because I think that is kind of a significant piece of that entrance, and I think that lends itself to the look that's there now, and so would you be okay with taking that as a condition?
We absolutely would take that as a condition. We think it's an important aspect of the entrance for for the development as well.
And I've been trying to keep score as we go along here, but I'm trying to understand if we have, throughout this process, asked you for any other conditions to this point, besides the one I just asked for.
We have the conditions relative to preferences. What other conditions? I can go through and look to see if there was anything else that you had.
Snow. So, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I think it was just historical artifacts would be turned
Right.
over.
Yes,
to
okay.
Yes.
So the historical
Society.
artifacts.
That's right.
Which I think the state's involved at that level anyways, correct?
They are, and as I said, we would agree to give the Danvers Historic Society right of first offer for anything that's found that the state does not want during the normal course of their review. They will do an archaeological review.
Board members, are we prepared to deliberate on this? Is there any additional questions? If not, I will
There's another woman who had a question.
raise your, oh, yeah, sure. Go to the microphone and identify yourself.
Ellen Sturdivant. I live at the condos down there. So my question is to...
I'm sorry, your address again?
152 Water Street.
152 Water, thank you.
At the condos, yep. My concern is for the people is that we live in the condos there, the one that they're showing there, and we have an access road behind us with an easement for the New England Home for the Deaf.
Correct.
So they're going to be putting in a new roadway, so are they going to use their new roadway for their construction vehicles and stuff, or are they going to be allowed to go up that access road?
I'll let Attorney McCann respond.
Yes, a construction of the new entrance is going to be the first thing that's done, so construction vehicles will use the new curb cut and entrance. They will not be using.
It's not going
that.
to 100% eliminate the use of the other road, but it sounds like your main access point is going to be this new curb cut.
Yes, and actually it will reduce what's going on now because service vehicles to the nursing home utilize that driveway. We discussed this during the community meeting.
And they no longer will.
And they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be utilizing the new entrance.
So you'll see a reduction. Okay, sounds like you like that part of it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we are going to move on to deliberations, and I am going to start with you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard a lot of information. I know that New England Homes for the Deaf has been a great organization and a great neighbor, and WIN seems like a very good company who's well-suited to the project. And we certainly could use 140 units in our affordable housing trust, and to provide these units would be a great benefit to the community that it's targeted to. But the building is twice as big and almost 18 times bigger in mass than what town meeting agreed to. And so I am a no on this project. It's too big.
Thank you, Jeff. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my first comment is more of a question. You guys, as a development team, said you met with the community. It sounded like everything was hunky-dory, the way that Attorney McCann presented it to us. I don't get that from the people that are here at this meeting. I do think the building is still too big, so I'm a no.
Thank you, Ken. Corrine?
I agree with Ken and Jeff. I am not opposed to the project. I'm opposed to the size of the project. It's just too big, too many units, and it's too tall. So if you want to rework the project, come back with a different design, I'm open to that. I think most of the people in the community are open to that, and I'm a no at this point.
Thank you. Ken, Javin, and I'll go out to you online.
Makes it more aesthetically pleasing. I was in favor of it. Look, I like the dormers. I think they've to it aesthetically pleasing in 4 stories or 3 stories. I think it's fair and reasonable. It is housing, affordable housing requirement that we have. There is a dire need for this type of housing, for this people. I mean, it's definitely dire need, and then also thereafter, I am for I would approve this. I think it's for the town.
You say yes.
Thank you, Ken. And Katie?
I agree with Ken. I do think there's, with the information we've been presented, that there is a need for this. The community, the deaf and near deaf community would benefit greatly from this, and I, for one, wouldn't want to deprive a community of that, community feel. I actually didn't mind the aesthetic of it. I do like the modern look, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised with the renderings, with the changes that were made, and I think it does really improve the aesthetic of it. And so it is big, but I think that there's a need for it, and I would approve it.
Thank you, Katie. Attorney McKinn, I too, like a lot of my fellow board members, I believe a lot of strides were made in the correct direction here. I do like the look a lot better. If you remember my comments earlier where this looked more like a strip mall, a little too commercial looking. I think you've done a lot to soften that look, give it a more residential look. But, I look back at the minutes, and 5 out of our 6 members all said it was too big last time. I think we've got a lot of that from the public as well, and it's still too big. So I am a no on that aspect of it. I do think this is something that's needed. I'm not against it, but I would like to see it reduce in size somewhat, and I can't quantify that for you, as you know. That's not really what our job here is, but I think it's too big. I do appreciate the efforts that are being put in by not only the WIN team, but the NEHD, and obviously planning, everybody that's put into this, and the neighbors as well. I think we've heard a lot of good comments. We understand the concerns. I think you have also listened to them, but the one we're not listening to is it's too big. So you don't have the votes currently. What would you like to do?
Can I ask, because we are hearing you, and what you're asking us to do is to go back again and look at the building and see if it's possible, and we've got to balance.
Sure,
A 50%
understood.
affordable project with how many market rate units you need to make that work, to meet the need, because there's no point in taking on this project if we don't meet the needs of New England Home for the Deaf and the senior community. So we've got to balance
Yep.
all of that. And,
I get
and
that.
we're willing to undertake that work again, but I want to make sure that we are doing so in the right direction so that we don't take up any more of your time.
Yeah.
So we've presented you with a very detailed plan with a lot of information. I am hearing the building too big, which I'm hearing too many units perhaps, and too high.
I think that would be a fair assumption.
Okay.
Yeah, fair summary by the board. It's a little too many units and a little too high.
Okay, I want to make sure that we focus on exactly what your concern is.
I just can't quantify it for
No,
you
no, no, and
because
I'm
that's not really
I'm-
where we're at, right?
I'm not asking you to do that, but is there anything else? I'm not hearing anything else. I'm hearing.
No, I think, there's plenty of check steps along the line for the neighbors as far as lighting and stormwater and noise from air conditioners and things that I would care about as a neighbor, that I would want to make sure is being addressed. I think, to my satisfaction anyway, you've highlighted all those items. Look, we could debate traffic till the cows come home. I don't think anybody can really and I applaud traffic engineers. I don't know how you do it, but, nobody can say with exact degree of certainty what the impact's going to be of a charter school in Peabody, or when Bishop Fenwick's dumping out at the same time, or there's a big, maybe Bob Gamir's back for bowling for dollars at, no one can tell, right? There's all sorts of scenarios, and we can't sit here and try to, I think that's more abstract. As much as, you have presented us a lot of information around traffic. So from where I sit, I think a lot of the things have been addressed. But I think height and number of units is the one thing I think I've heard it from a couple of the neighbors. They'd be okay with something. And we're all in agreement that there's a need here. There's a need on many levels, not only for blind and deafblind and partially blind, but there's a housing need, affordable housing need. So we get all that. I think we're all on board with all that. But and I'll just make sure. Is there other comments from the board that should be added to besides unit count and height?
No.
Okay. So I
Okay.
think from where we sit, that's what that's where the no votes are right
Okay.
now.
I appreciate that. We, as a team, appreciate that information. We would like to have an opportunity to address that, so I would ask that you allow us to continue, not to your next meeting, but to your first meeting in May.
So that would be May 8th.
To your May 8 meeting, and we will see what we can do to address that specific concern.
Okay. Could I
Mr.
get-
Chairman, you make a motion that we continue this case to May 8th.
I've
I'll
got-
second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll see you
Thank you
on
very
May
much.
8th, and if there's updated drawings, please get them out in
Oh, we will.
advance.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to take a short recess. Sorry with the case that's on the line there. Just give us a couple of minutes here.
Signs LLC, docket 23-5013.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for hanging in with us. Who do we have online with us tonight?
Good evening, it's Bobby Zulli with Starbucks Coffee.
Hi, I'm sorry, one more time on your name.
Bobby Zulli with Starbucks Coffee.
Bobby Zulli, thank you. And anyone else?
Thank you.
Yes, Brian Dundon from R.G. O'Connell and Associates. I am site civil engineer on behalf of Petzold Enterprises, the owner of the shopping center.
Okay.
And this is Tom Petzold of Petzold Enterprises, the owner of the shopping center.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming in. We had a lot of questions last time. Didn't think I think it was it Cerrado signs, there was some of the questions we could not get answered. So I don't know who's going to speak for you, but if you could just present and tell us, I guess maybe bring us up to speed. We didn't get any updated plans that I'm aware of, so who's going to speak?
I can speak. This is Bobby Zulli. So we're here again to discuss the 2 pre-menu boards at the Danvers location. They were on the original plan that was submitted to the town. They got flagged when they went through the sign application, which is the Cerrado Sign Company, with the going to the double drive-through order point is what triggered the amount of signs versus the bylaw restrictions.
Okay, and were you able to review the last meeting, and do you feel like you can speak to some of the questions that came up from this board?
Yep, I watched the video, and I have all the any questions that the board has.
I didn't catch what he said. Could you repeat that? We had a little audio breakup.
Yeah, I was able to watch the video from the last hearing. I understand the questions. I have answers to those questions, and if the board has any other questions for tonight, I am prepared to answer those as well.
Yeah, why don't you just bring us through what we already asked and update us.
Okay, so I believe one of the questions was the amount of cars in the car line and the stack. The Y lane will create, it's between 15 to 16 cars in total before the tail gets out onto, let's call it the ring road of the plaza, where the other drive-through for the clothing drop-off center is. So we're trying to keep the cars off of that ring road per se. As far as clarity to what's on the pre-menu boards, they're the all-day breakfast sandwiches. You'll have hot beverages, cold iced beverages, and on the bottom screens you'll have the anytime bakery and the all-day lunch specials. So the theory behind the pre-menu boards is as the customer's waiting to approach the order point, they can start to understand what they want to get, see what's being offered, so when they get to the order point, they're not taking that time to then look at the menu board, which is placed in the I location on the screen that just came up. And that would help push the cars forward. The interior where the partners work, both sides are able to have 2 different order takers. So say left side, right side, each team member will have a different headset. They can be on different screens at the same time. And then in the slower times, they'll probably just close down one of the sides of the drive-through lane to make it an easier flow for the inside.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I believe I covered all the questions that were on the last meeting. If I didn't, I apologize, but I believe I got most of them.
Okay, if you don't have, or your team doesn't have anything else to add, I can throw it out to the board and we'll see if we have any additional questions or if the questions were answered from the last meeting. You have anything else that any of your team wants to add to this? Okay, Katie, let's start down there with you.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Ken Jarvinen.
I have no,
Okay, Corinne.
I just have a couple questions. First of all, what, maybe the owner, who I know is here, of the strip mall can answer this question. I believe it's Savers, it's not the clothing store, correct? And what are the hours of operation for Savers?
I do not have that information with me.
And the only reason why I'm asking is because the gentleman from Starbucks just said that one of the concerns and why the reason for the double lane was because they wanted to free up that access road because people are driving into the back to drop off donations or to drop off clothes to Savers. So, and that makes sense. And I didn't even think of that when, you know, when you made the presentation last time as to why you would need the double lane. But I guess the reason why I'm asking is if Savers doesn't open until after your high point in the morning, then there really isn't much, I guess, traffic as far as someone going to the back and someone going to the drive-through.
You know, I guess if I could turn this over to my engineer, Brian, because quite a bit of study went into the shape and the design of making these two drives compatible with one another. So, Brian, can you address this?
Yeah, yes. Just good evening for the record. Again, my name is Brian Dunn, a site civil engineer with R.J. O'Connell and Associates. And to address the issue, this question also came up during the planning board process, where there was there was some concern about how the flow of traffic was going to be through Starbucks versus the Savers. And to your point is during what we found out and what we observed and what planning board has mentioned to us is that usually on the weekends is where the Savers pick up and drop off area. It has the most, is the busiest. So taking that into account and taking into account the Starbucks operation, what we have done is to find one distinct point to go either towards Starbucks, which would be straight through or straight down the sheet into the drive-through lane to get their order, or they would go slightly to my left or to your right, per se, to go through the pickup and drop-off lane. And what we did is the opening along the Mall Ring Road, which is just a little bit above that plan, has sufficient width to it to allow the traffic to make those moves without conflicting with each other. We have also doubled up the drive-through or the drop-off lane for Savers to be 2 lanes where there could be 8 cars in line before it would get back out to where you see the crosswalk that connects the Savers sidewalk with the Starbucks sidewalk. So we believe that we've mitigated or the question was asked by planning. It was a concern for them. We believe we have the appropriate traffic control measures in place to segregate traffic for Savers versus customer traffic for Starbucks.
Okay, thank you.
Ken.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any other questions. I'm going to wait for comments.
Thanks, Ken. And Jeff.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
So if I understand correctly, your site just opened this past weekend?
Friday morning we opened, yes.
And you mentioned there's 2 order takers, and you got queuing of 16 cars, correct?
That is correct, yep.
And I imagine there's like a certain amount of time you like to see the orders go through. Do you have that? Like, is it a minute? Is it under a minute? Is it 5 minutes? What is it?
Under a minute is preferable. The faster, the better. It all depends on the orders. If they're a combination of, hot food, custom beverage drinks, or just a, drip cup of coffee, that's kind of how the time varies. The goal is to definitely be below a minute from order to pickup.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand what does this pre-menu board buy you? I guess I don't see the value in it, but I'm gonna let you tell me what Starbucks sees in it, and how in a perfect world it works.
Yep, so kind of like what I said earlier, in the perfect world, we've seen that as you approach the pre-menu board, you're pondering your thoughts to see what you want for a beverage, sandwich, pastry, whatever it may be. By the time the car in front of you that's at the order location pulls forward, you've now seen the menu, and that saves some time because hopefully at that point you already have your full thoughts together that you're going to place your order versus getting to the order point and then looking at the menu. It's those few seconds that we save while the car in front of you is ordering, you're starting to see the pre-menu basically.
And is the speaker that you're speaking into, is that part of the menu board, or is that a separate device before you hit the menu board?
That's completely separate.
Okay, so it's kind of like a three-piece equation here. Pre-order board, microphone with a menu behind it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I know in the last meeting, somebody brought up the McDonald's on 114, how they have the Y lane. They're a different model than we are. Their food's more prepared. So that's why, and they don't have the distance to put a pre-menu board at that location. But the food mixtures are completely different anomaly.
Okay, and I guess that's all I have for questions. So I'll go out to the public. Mr. Bradstreet, we're good? Okay. If you guys don't have anything else to present, I will turn it back over to the board and we can deliberate. Okay. Katie, let's start down there with you.
I made the same comment last time. I don't see a need for a pre-menu board. I think most customers coming to Starbucks, myself included, you know what you're getting already. And so I don't see how the menu board itself doesn't fill the need that customers, fill the customer's need. So I'd be a no.
Thank you, Katie. Ken Jarvinen.
I don't think it's detrimental to the community to have this, to have the two lanes there, to a pre-menu board thing.
So you'd be in favor?
I would be in favor of it, yes.
Thank you. Corinne.
I'm glad that we received, I guess, the detail to know why we need to have like the double drive-through lane. And now that you mention about savers, I agree with that. You certainly wouldn't want to have a tie-up where you have people trying to go to the right and they can't because people are trying to go to the left. So again, I see why you need the double lane and why you need things queued that way. I'm just not sure why you need three boards per lane. And basically that's why you're here, because you get 4 anyway, right? So, so anyway, I'm a no. I think 4 signs are enough.
Thank you. And Ken Scholes.
Thank you. I agree with Corinne. I don't see the necessity of this. You go to a fast food place, which this is, let's be honest, you know what you're getting when you pull up. You don't need to see the wine list. So I think you don't need that board, and I don't agree with giving a variance for this, so I'm a no.
Thank you, Ken. Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starbucks' opinion is they need this to improve the traffic flow, and the location of these signs in a back corner of a parking lot, to me, is not going to impact anybody having more signs than we think they should have, so I'm a yes on this.
Well, now you left it down to the non-coffee drinker who doesn't go to these things. This is a variance, correct?
Variance.
It's 4.
Oh, so he's not gonna, you don't have the votes either way. All right, well, you don't have the votes. What I can recommend is that you can withdraw without prejudice, or you can ask us to take a vote, but you don't have the votes currently to have it pass. So what would you like to do?
How many votes do you need for it to pass?
Supermajority, 4-1.
Yeah, right now we're at 2 to 3, so. Yeah, I guess at this point, there's nothing we can do, and I just hope the traffic stays consistent and we don't have to have any issues.
Well,
into the detail.
if you ask for a withdrawal without prejudice, and, you know, you feel this is a glaring problem, you know, you could come back before this board and point these things out, and I'm sure the planning department would be dialed in with that piece of it, and maybe we would look at this differently at that point. But withdrawing without prejudice allows you to do that at any point in time. If we take a vote and deny you, it's 2 years before you can go before us. So that's your choices. You can have us vote, you can withdraw without prejudice.
I guess at this point, we'll withdraw without prejudice.
Withdraw without prejudice.
Okay, could I get a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that we allow the applicant to withdraw without prejudice.
I'll second.
I got a motion, and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
And seconded.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Danvers.
Thank you.